The auction hall of the Marquis of Thornwood's London residence was thick with the scent of dust and dying lilies. The late Marquis had gambled away the unentailed portions of his fortune, leaving behind a daughter and a mountain of debt. The creditors, vultures in mourning clothes, had descended upon the townhouse on Cavendish Square with sharpened pencils and hollow condolences. The daughter, Miss Helena Markham, had not been seen at the public viewing. Rumor said she was too prostrate with grief. Reality said she was in the servants' quarters, trying to find a clean dress for the housemaids who had not been paid in 3 months. Helena stood now in the corner of the auction room, a ledger open in her hands, ticking off items as the auctioneer's gavel fell. She was not dressed for the occasion. Her gray wool gown had been mended at the cuffs, and her dark hair was pinned severely back, not with fashioned silk flowers but with simple steel combs. She looked like a governess or perhaps a poor relation. In truth, she was both. The Duke of Rotherford sat in the front row, his long legs crossed, his gloved hand resting on a silver-headed cane he did not need. He was 32, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from a mountainside, hard lines, a mouth that rarely softened, eyes the color of winter slate. He had purchased the Marquis's library, the dining table, 24 chairs, a crate of wine, and a rather ugly portrait of a distant ancestor. The ton whispered behind their programs. The Duke of Rotherford collected things, not out of greed, but out of a cold, efficient desire to own the world he moved through. Sentiment was for men who could afford weakness. Lot 74, the auctioneer called, his voice hoarse. The remaining service staff. Due to the estate's insolvency, their contracts are forfeit. We offer, as chattel, the services of one Miss Helena Markham, daughter of the late Marquis, to settle a debt of £140. A murmur rippled through the room. Helena's pen stopped moving. The auctioneer, red-faced and sweating, had clearly been coerced by the chief creditor into this barbaric display. The crowd turned, craning their necks to see the woman in the corner. They saw a pale face, a steady gaze, and a spine as straight as a lamppost. "This is indecent," a baron's wife whispered, but she did not leave. The auctioneer looked miserable. "Shall we start the bidding at £20? Silence. The room was a sea of averted eyes. No one wanted to buy a gently bred woman. It was a scandal, and scandal was only useful if one could control the narrative. But to buy a marquis's daughter, it was a step too far, even for the ton. £5, a voice said, lazy and cold. The Duke of Rotherford did not raise his hand. He simply spoke. The word fell into the silence like a stone into a still pond. £5 to the gentleman, the auctioneer said, his voice shaking. Do I hear 10? No one moved. The Duke's reputation preceded him. To bid against him was to invite a social winter. To agree with him was to condone the monstrous. 1 guinea, then, the Duke said, his tone bored. She is, after all, only one item among many, and I have already purchased the chairs. A ripple of horrified laughter. Someone clapped a hand over a mouth. A dowager turned away in disgust, but the gavel fell. Sold, for 1 guinea to the Duke of Rotherford. Helena closed the ledger. She did not gasp. She did not weep. She simply walked through the crowd, which parted for her as if she carried a plague. When she reached the auctioneer's table, she set the ledger down gently. I trust the accounts are in order, she said, her voice clear, carrying to the farthest corner of the room. The debt is settled. Good day. She turned to face the Duke. He had risen, his great height dwarfing the men around him. He looked at her as if she were a mislabeled portrait, an item of little interest but some curiosity. You have a bag? He asked. I have a small valise, she replied. It is already in the hall. He nodded once. My steward will see you to the carriage. Helena curtsied, the movement precise and cold. Not a single tear touched her eyes. She did not beg. She did not look back. She walked out of the auction hall, her head high, leaving behind the scandalized whispers of the ton and the faint, mocking scent of dying lilies. But inside her chest, a quiet fire had begun to burn, a fire that would not be extinguished by humiliation, a fire that would, in time, consume an entire duchy. The carriage ride from London to Rotherford Hall took 6 hours. Helena sat opposite the Duke's stone-faced steward, a thin man named Mr. Croft, who did not speak except to offer her a dry biscuit. She declined with a small shake of her head and watched the city give way to rolling green hills, then to the gray, windswept moorland of the Duke's ancestral seat. Rotherford Hall rose from the landscape like a clenched fist. It was a vast, square fortress of pale stone, its windows narrow and uninviting. No ivy softened its walls. No flowers bloomed at its gates. She was shown to a small room in the servants' wing, not the attics but not the family floor. The bed was clean, the fire unlit. She was told the Duke would see her at first light. She did not sleep. She sat by the window and watched the moon drag clouds across the sky. When the gray dawn came, she washed her face, pinned her hair, and presented herself in the Duke's study. Rotherford sat behind a massive oak desk, a stack of ledgers before him. He did not look up when she entered. "You are to be assigned to the scullery," he said, turning a page. "Mrs. Thorne, the housekeeper, will give you your duties. You will be paid £3 a year and found." Helena stood still. "Your Grace, I do not wish to work in the scullery." He raised his eyes then, winter slate. "You were purchased as a servant. Servants do not choose their posts." "Then I will not be a servant," she said, her voice level. "I will be an understeward. Your ledgers are in disarray. I can see from here that the third column on the page before you has been copied from the fourth, and that the totals do not reconcile. You are being robbed." The Duke's jaw tightened. He glanced at the ledger, then back at her. "You read ledgers." "My father taught me. I kept his books for 6 years while he gambled away the estate. I can balance an account, manage a tenant roll, and spot a falsified receipt at 20 paces. Put me in the scullery and you waste a guinea. Put me in your study and I will find you 100. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. She did not blink. "Very well, a trial, 1 month. You will work under Mr. Croft. If you fail, the scullery awaits." She nodded once. "I will need access to the tenant contracts and the rent rolls." "You will have them." She worked through that first week with quiet ferocity. The ledgers were a mess of forged entries, inflated grain prices, and phantom repairs. Mr. Croft watched her with narrow, resentful eyes. She ignored him. On the third day, she found a discrepancy of £40 in the roof repair account. On the fifth, she discovered that 3 tenant families had been charged twice for the same spring planting. She did not confront Croft. She simply made a separate ledger, a shadow book, and wrote down every crime. On the 6th day, a tenant boy came running to the kitchen door, his face white with panic. His mother was sick, his father dead, and the roof of their cottage had collapsed in the last storm. The Duke's steward had refused to send help, saying the family was behind on rent. Helena heard the boy's story from the scullery maid. She did not ask permission. She took a horse from the stable, a satchel of herbs from the still-room, and rode out into the gray afternoon. She found the family in a dripping, half-ruined cottage on the edge of the moor. The mother lay on a straw pallet, burning with fever. The children were thin and silent. Helena rolled up her sleeves, built a fire, boiled water, and set about making the woman comfortable. She sent the eldest boy to the village for a physician, paid from her own small purse. She stayed until nightfall, feeding the children, patching the roof with tarpaulin, and holding the woman's hand when the fever peaked. The Duke, riding home from a neighboring estate, saw the light in the cottage window and the horse tied outside. He drew rein. Through the glass he saw Helena Markham, her hair coming loose, her gray gown smeared with soot, kneeling beside a sick woman. She was not performing. She was not posing. She was simply doing what no one else had done. A sensation he had not felt in years stirred in his chest. He did not know what it was. He turned his horse and rode on, leaving the light behind. The next morning, the Duke summoned Helena to his study. Mr. Croft stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of injured innocence. Rutherford did not offer Helena a seat. You took a horse without permission. You entered a tenant cottage without my steward's approval. You spent your own coin on a physician. Explain yourself. Helena set her shadow ledger on the desk. I did what Mr. Croft should have done. I found a dying woman and I helped her. That is not an explanation. It is a fact. Croft made a sound of contempt. Your Grace, the girl has no authority. She is a purchased servant playing at charity. The tenants are behind on rent and she encourages their neglect. Helena did not look at him. She opened the ledger. The tenants are behind because you have charged them twice, Mr. Croft. The roof repairs were never made. The grain prices are inflated. You have stolen at least £400 from this estate in the last 2 years. I have the original receipts and the tenant statements to prove it. The room seemed to tighten. Croft's face went white. That is a lie. It is in your own hand, Helena said, producing a sheaf of papers. I found the original purchase orders in the cellar behind the wine casks. You kept them. You were too arrogant to burn them. Rutherford took the papers. He read them slowly. His face did not change, but the air around him grew cold as a winter window. He looked up at Croft. Get out, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Croft opened his mouth, then closed it. He fled. The door clicked shut. The Duke turned to Helena. His eyes were not grateful. They were blazing with wounded pride. You made a fool of me. I made a fool of Croft, she said. You merely failed to notice. Do not be clever with me. You are still a purchased item, a guinea. You can be sold again. The words landed like a lash. Helena did not flinch. She looked at him for a long, steady moment. A man who cannot see the value in loyalty will find his own halls empty. Good day, Your Grace. She curtsied, not low, but enough. Then she turned her back and walked out of the study. She packed her bag. The storm that had been building all afternoon broke overhead, rain lashing the windows. She put on her cloak, took her valise, and walked out the front door. The footman stared. The housekeeper called after her. She did not stop. The rain soaked her in seconds. The drive was a ribbon of mud. She walked on, her head high, her bag heavy, the wind howling across the moor. She did not look back at the house. Behind her in the study, Rutherford stood at the window, watching her figure disappear into the gray. He could have called for a carriage. He could have sent a servant after her. He did neither. He stood there, his hand pressed against the cold glass, and felt the first crack appear in the wall he had built around himself. Helena walked for 2 miles in the rain before a cart rattled up behind her. It was the tenant family she had helped, the eldest boy driving, the mother wrapped in blankets in the back. The boy pulled the horse to a stop. Miss Markham, he said, his voice breaking. We heard. The Duke turned you out. You'll catch your death. Please come with us. She climbed into the cart without argument. The mother, weak but awake, reached out and gripped her hand. You saved my life. Now we save yours. They took her to the village of Rutherford, a cluster of stone cottages around a muddy green. The family's own home was still half ruined, but the neighbors had taken them in. Helena was given a small room above the blacksmith's shop, a bed of clean straw and a bowl of hot broth. She slept for 12 hours. When she woke, the village was buzzing. The story had spread from cottage to cottage, field to field. The woman who had corrected the ledgers, who had ridden out in the storm, who had faced the Duke's own steward and won, she had been cast out. The tenants, who had suffered Croft's theft and the Duke's harsh rent increases for 2 years, found a voice they had lost. The next rent collection day arrived. The Duke's new steward, a nervous young man from London, set up his table in the great hall, ready to receive payments. The courtyard was empty. Not a single tenant came. The hours passed. The steward shuffled papers. The Duke, waiting in his study, demanded a report. They are not coming, Your Grace, the steward said, his voice thin. Rutherford strode to the window. The courtyard was a gray stone square, swept clean and utterly empty. On the table in the hall below, a single note had been left, slipped under the door by an unseen hand. The steward brought it to him. The Duke unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, the ink smudged by rain. "We will pay our rents when Miss Markham is restored to the estate as our advocate. Until then, not 1 shilling will pass from our hands to yours." Rutherford read it twice. His grip tightened, crumpling the paper. His tenants, were refusing to pay. Over a woman he had bought for a guinea and then discarded. The humiliation was absolute, but beneath the anger something else moved, a grudging, bitter admiration. He had never faced a rebellion like this. It was not loud, it was silent, it was disciplined, and it was hers. The Duke summoned his solicitor, Mr. Hartley, a cautious man with spectacles and a nervous cough. He spread the rent ledgers across the desk and pointed at the empty columns. "I want eviction notices drawn up. Every tenant who has withheld payment will be removed before the first frost." Hartley did not reach for his pen. "Your Grace, I must advise against this. The tenants are not refusing on their own. They have legal grievances, the double charging, the unrepaired roofs, the inflated grain prices. If this goes before a magistrate, the evidence will not favor the estate. And there is the matter of Miss Markham." Rutherford's jaw tightened. What matter? "The public auction of her person. It is being spoken of in London drawing rooms. A marquis's daughter sold as chattel. The scandal has reached the ears of several influential families. If you evict the tenants now, you will be seen as a tyrant. The press will have a field day. Your political interests will suffer." The Duke said nothing. He walked to the window and stared out at the rain. He had built his reputation on being untouchable, on owning what he wanted and discarding what he did not. But Helena Markham was not a chair. She was not a ledger. She was a woman with a mind like a steel trap and a spine like iron. And she was living in a blacksmith's attic, teaching his tenants to read their contracts. He rode out that afternoon alone. The village was quiet, the sky low and gray. He found the village hall, a small stone building by the green. Through the window he saw her. She stood before a group of children, a piece of chalk in her hand, writing sums on a slate. Her gray gown was clean but worn. Her hair was pinned back, a few strands loose at her temples. She was not performing for an audience. She was simply teaching. He waited until the children filed out, then stepped into the doorway. Helena turned. She did not look surprised. "Your Grace," she said, "you have come a long way to gloat." "I have not come to gloat." His voice was rough. "I have come to demand that you end this. The tenants are refusing to pay. They will starve if this continues. You are harming them." She set down the chalk and dusted her hands. "I am not harming them. I am helping them understand that their silence has a price. You can raise their rents, evict them, and watch your land fall into ruin. Or you can listen." "Listen to what?" "To them, to me, to the truth you have ignored for 2 years." He took a step forward, his presence filling the small room. "I am the Duke of Rutherford. I do not negotiate with tenants." "Then you will lose them," she said simply. "And you will lose me, not that I was ever yours to keep." The words hung between them. He wanted to argue, to command, to break through her calm. But she was not afraid of him. She was not moved by his title or his anger. She was looking at him as if he were a boy throwing a tantrum. "I will return," he said, "when you come to your senses." He turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. But as he rode away, he knew he would be back, and that knowledge terrified him more than any tenant revolt. That evening, as he sat alone in his study, a footman brought a letter on a silver tray. The seal was heavy, the wax dark blue. He broke it open. It was from Lord Ashworth, the local magistrate and a man whose good opinion mattered in the county. The note was brief. "Rutherford, I am hearing troubling reports from your estate. The tenant unrest, the auction of the Markham girl, the whispers in London. I advise you to resolve this matter quickly and with grace. You are being watched." The Duke set the letter down. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moaned across the moor. He was trapped, And for the second time in his life, he did not know what to do. He did not sleep that night. The letter lay on his desk like a blade. He paced the study, his boots heavy on the oak floor. The fire burned low. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed in gray. At dawn, he made a decision. He did not call for his steward or his solicitor. He dressed simply, in a dark coat and riding boots, and walked to the stables. He saddled his horse himself, ignoring the startled groom. He rode to the river. It was a wide, slow-moving ribbon of water that marked the southern boundary of his land. The willows hung over the banks, their leaves dripping. She was there, as he had hoped, standing at the water's edge, watching the current. He dismounted and walked toward her. She did not turn. "I have received a letter from Lord Ashworth," he said. "He tells me I am being watched, that my handling of the Markham affair is damaging my reputation." "Then you must be careful," she said, her voice quiet. "Reputation is a fragile thing." "I did not come to talk of reputation." He stopped a few feet away. "I came to apologize." She turned then slowly. Her eyes were steady, unreadable. "For what?" "For the auction, for treating you as a piece of furniture, for being blind to your worth since you arrived." The words came hard, each one dragged from a place he had long kept locked. "I was wrong. I have been wrong about many things." She watched him for a long moment. "Why now? Because your tenants refuse to pay, because Lord Ashworth writes you letters. Because you walked into the rain and I let you go." His voice cracked just slightly. "Because I have been a fool and I am tired of being a fool." The river ran on. A bird called from the far bank. Helena took a breath. "I will not return as your property," she said. "I will not be bought or kept or commanded. If I return, it will be as your employee, a salaried advocate for the tenants, with my own cottage, my own authority, and my own name." He nodded. "I have drawn up the papers, a formal position, estate advocate. You will answer only to me and to the tenants. You will have a cottage on the North Meadow, a horse, and a salary of £40 a year." She raised an eyebrow. "That is generous." "It is not generous. It is what you are worth." For a long moment she simply looked at him. Then she extended her hand. He took it, his gloved fingers closing around hers. The touch was brief, but it sent a current through him that had nothing to do with the cold air. "I will return," she said, "but not for you, for them." She released his hand and walked past him toward the path. He stood by the river watching her go and felt something loosen in his chest. He had not won her. He had not bought her. He had, perhaps, begun to earn her. Helena returned to Rotherford Land not as a servant but as the estate advocate. She did not go to the great house. She went to the tenants. She walked from cottage to cottage, speaking with the farmers, the blacksmith, the miller's wife, the widow on the moor. She listened. She wrote down their grievances. She corrected their contracts. She made sure the rents were fair and the roofs were repaired. And the tenants paid their rents. The great hall was busy again, but not with anger, with papers and receipts and quiet conversations. The Duke watched from the gallery unseen. Helena moved among them like a woman born to it, not a servant, not a lady, but something rarer, a bridge between two worlds that had never spoken the same language. He began to find reasons to be in her company: a walk through the North Meadow to discuss the harvest, a review of the grain ledgers in the library, a shared cup of tea in the cottage she now called home. He did not press her. He did not demand. He simply came, and she allowed it. The weeks passed. The frost came early, painting the fields white. The tenant children hung garlands of dried flowers on her door. The women brought her bread and honey. The men tipped their caps. She was no longer the Duke's purchase. She was their champion. And the Duke watched her grow into her power, and he knew he was lost. The harvest festival arrived on a cold, bright evening. The village green was strung with lanterns. Tables of food lined the edge of the meadow. The tenants danced and laughed and drank cider. Helena stood at the center of it all, her gray gown replaced by a simple blue wool dress, her dark hair loose for once, falling over her shoulders. She was laughing at something the miller's son had said when the Duke appeared at the edge of the green. The crowd stilled, the laughter faded. The Duke of Rotherford in his dark coat and polished boots walked through the lantern light toward her. He did not look at the tenants, he looked only at her. He stopped before her. The wind stirred the leaves. Somewhere a fiddle played a slow, mournful tune. "I have been a proud man," he said, his voice carrying across the green. "I have been a cold man. I have treated people as things to be bought and sold, and I was wrong." He reached into his coat and produced a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a ring, not a diamond but a deep green emerald, the color of the North Meadow in spring. "Helena Markham," he said, "I do not offer you a position. I do not offer you a purchase. I offer you my hand, my name, and my heart if you will have them." The tenants held their breath. The fiddle stopped. Even the wind seemed to pause. Helena looked at the ring, then at the man before her. She saw the cracks in his armor, the shadow of the man he had been, and the faint outline of the man he was trying to become. She saw the arrogance that had broken and the humility that had grown in its place. She saw him. She stepped forward. She took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. "I will have them," she said, "all of them, but you must promise me one thing." "Anything." "You will never again mistake a person for a piece of furniture." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. The Duke's mouth curved, a real smile, warm and unexpected. "I will never again mistake you for anything less than what you are," he said. "The woman who taught a duke to see." He took her hand and the tenants erupted into cheers. The fiddle struck up again, a reel this time, and the green came alive with dancing. The first cold wind of autumn swept through the village, but no one felt it. The hall was no longer empty. The land was no longer silent. And the Duke of Rotherford, who had once sold a woman with the chairs, knelt in the lantern light and kissed her hand, and the whole duchy seemed to exhale.